Thank you. So I'll invite now Dr. Luigi Cabrini, Chairman of Global Sustainable Tourism Council, to make his presentation. Dr. Cabrini is the Chairman and the Board of Directors of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and the former Director of Sustainable Tourism at the UNWTO. He has led several initiatives on sustainable tourism at the global level, on tourism and climate change, tourism and biodiversity, observatories for sustainable tourism, the green economy, tourism and cultural heritage. So Dr. Cabrini, now I ask you to start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you all. What a great night we had yesterday. I think a taste of the joie de vivre de Mauritius. I can also see that a lot of wine was served because there are not many participants today as there were yesterday. But anyway, I thank you for being here, and I hope that we will have an interactive section today. So this was already shown yesterday, so I won't repeat what has been said. I only want to highlight the yellow area of these slides. This is Asia. Asia is basically driving most of the growth of international tourism. China is today the top spender in international tourism, and the Chinese tourists spend the double of the next, which is USA. Now, only 7-8 years ago, China was not even the first, so that gives you a taste, an idea of how this emerging China, India, new middle classes emerging in these countries and with a high propensity of expenditure in travel and tourism. Another characteristics of the development of tourism today is that if you see this graph, by the year 2020, the 20 most popular destinations will have received 120 million international tourists more. The almost 180 other countries will have about 50 million international tourists. So there is a concentration on the most visited destination, which has an impact again on the over-tourists that I will address later in my presentation. This is the sunny side of tourism, the positive issues, 10% of GDP, 1 every 10 jobs, and a number of other benefits. I'd just like to mention 2 examples. Maldives was in the list of least developed countries. Thanks to tourism, was able to get out of that list. Spain, almost a G7 country, in the major economic crisis 2008-2011, tourism was the only sector that generated employment and basically was able to compensate for the loss in many other sectors. But there is also a dark side to tourism, the negative impact. And these are basically in 3 main areas. Negative impact on nature, on the environment, depletion of natural resources, pollutions, etc. Then there is a negative impact on culture, what we can say the commodification of culture. Some destinations, unfortunately, present what they believe the tourists want to see and not what they really are, and then there is a loss of identity and cultural identity. And then finally, last but not least, negative attitude from the host community. And this is, as you know, recently, and I will mention that later, the phenomenon of tourismophobia or over-tourism. Now, my view is that if nature were able to speak, we will have had reactions a long time ago. But the impact on local residents has been relatively recent. So the answer to that, how do we manage that equation? Of course, this for us is sustainable tourism, which is not a niche, it's not a tourist segment, but it's an approach on how we do tourism, both mass tourism, niche tourism, and all segment of it. There are 2 drivers, in my view, to stronger sustainable tourism. One is a political recognition of tourism. What I would say is a higher dignity of tourism as a sector. Here I just mentioned some of the important events since the Rio Convention up to the International Year of Ecotourism, and somehow the culmination last year in 2017 with International Year of Sustainable Development for Tourism. Strong recognitions of tourism as a sector that contributes and drives sustainable development. And then there is an economic driver. This is a study on the green economy, the tourist sector in the green economy. And basically what the study told us, and tells us in fact, is that if you have a green scenario with more renewable energy with investment in biodiversity protection, etc., you end up with a scenario where not only you reduce energy consumptions, greenhouse gas emissions, but basically you create additional jobs. But if you remain in a business as usual, fossil fuels, no investment in community development, etc., the results are likely to be rather negative, and also there will be less generation of employment. Now, seeds, we are in Mauritius. In fact, 2005, Mauritius was the host of a conference that adopted a major implementation plan for seeds for small island development states. Tourism, of course, is a major player in small islands, in all islands and seeds. And briefly, you can see here what are the challenges I mean, some are obvious: the connectivity, the scarcity of resources, climate change. I will mention something about climate change, leakages, the amount of money that leaves the island instead of remaining there. Sometimes difficulties in engaging the community, but there are also a lot of good opportunities. The blues and green economies, for example. And a live shark for the diving is worth 100 times more than a dead shark to be eaten. This is also some of the results of some of the study we've done. A small island in Canary Islands called El Hierro. It's basically today achieve 80% of the energy requirements due to aeolic and solar. So it's basically almost self-sufficient. So somehow made use of its insularity to develop a green economy. And then, as you know, often tourism is the only sector that can be a generator of employment for women and for youth. So briefly, this is not new, but unfortunately it's still valid. Climate change is hitting hard. There are hotspots. Highland oceans are among the hotspots. There are a lot of negative impact of the climate change. And yesterday, Lyman addressed a bit the issue on the mitigation side, how the tourist sector can reduce its emission. But I think it's important to see also from the perspective of the adaptation, I mean, what the tourist sector need to do. So this chart basically shows you the various impact of climate change, from water supply, health of coral reef, biodiversity change, sea level rise, etc., etc. And the colors, yellow, orange, and red, is the time frame on which these are likely to impact more likely or more strongly. And as you can see, all of them are likely to have impact, many already now, and some in the near future. So mitigation on one side, but adaptation as well. There's a pretty strong message. And if you look at what is the flexibility of the different components of the tourist chain, we see that the tourist is at the higher flexibility. And in time of digitalization, even more. You know, in a day, you can change your destinations, you can change your travel plans, etc. But when we talk about tour operators, transport providers, the flexibility, the scenario, the time scenario for a business decision is a bit longer, and not to talk about hotel, resorts, attractions, etc., where your investment scenario, panorama, needs to at least take into account next 30, 40, or even 50 years. And we've seen how climate change can have impact on these areas. So what do we do as GSTC? So we like to call ourselves a leading global authority in setting and managing standards for sustainable travel and tourism. We are an NGO, not-for-profit, officially established in 2010, but started working back in 2007, strongly backed by the UN Foundation that basically funded it for the first 3 years, and strong support from the World Tourism Organizations and United Nations Environmental Programme. But from the beginning, pretty much oriented toward the private sector. And if you look at some of our members, Royal Caribbean, Intercontinental, TUI, etc., you will see that this is, I think, a bit of our strength. What we try on the one hand to have be legitimized and recognized as an impartial international body, but what we believe it is a key if you want to be more sustainable is to be able to influence and to get on board the major players, the major companies in the tourist business. So our main core work is the criteria. We developed the first set in 2008 for hotels and tour operators. Then we had the destination in 2013, and last year the criteria for industry. This is basically an umbrella that will include all the different segments from cruise, transport, etc., MICE, etc. And basically, these criteria are a set of very simple statements: maximize positive benefit, minimize negative impact. It's as simple as that. There is not a final solution. It's all a matter of how you graduate the impact of your tourist businesses, and of course, organized in the traditional 4 pillars of sustainability. These have been translated in 20 different languages. They are, of course, freely available on our website. We have also done an exercise in SDG, will be also a topic of the panel today, and we basically matched each of the 41 criteria for destination with one or more of SDGs. So if you're interested, again, you can have a look at the website of GSTC and see what is the relation between each criterion and the Sustainable Development Goals. So very briefly, how do we use these criteria? For, I would say, 2 main reasons. One is to assess destinations. It's basically giving a destination a diagnostic of where it stands, making an assessment against the 41 criteria for destinations. And basically, this is some of the work we've done, many islands, many coastal areas. And basically then delivering to the managers, to the leaders of the destination, a report with a number of bars, where the red are the criteria which are still not met, the yellow, we're getting close, green, they're okay, and basically putting the element for a roadmap in order to be able to improve and to address the shortcoming of that particular destinations. Another program that we run, and I think it's an innovative program, is what we call Integrity Program. This is basically creating an accreditation in the tourist sector that did not exist. We have then 2 levels. One is the recognitions. A certification program approaches us and want to know whether the standards are in line with the GSTC global standards. So we do assess them with an accreditation panel and we'll tell them yes or no. And then the next step, which is the accreditation, which means that it's not only the standards, but all the processes follow the ICL code, impartiality, competence, transparencies, etc. So some of the recognized standards here are international, some of the international recognized standards: Rainforest Alliance, S-Check, Biosphere, Green Key, etc. Some of the national recognized standards, Ecotourism Australia and Green Stars Hotel in Egypt, etc., etc. Now, the accreditation, we have so far been able to accredit 5 programs. These are Ecotourism Australia, Control Union, Travel Life, EdCheck, and Rainforest Alliance. So what is our message? What we don't want to replace certification program, we want to strengthen them. There are today some 300 certification programs dealing with the tourist sector. Some of them are better known, some of them are less known, but the fact is that there is a certain amount of confusion from this point of view of the travel of the consumers. What that this label means to me, who verifies what they say is true or not. So through this accreditation process, we basically aim at reinforcing and basically telling the public, look, these for the moment are 5, but there will be more. These, they all meet the global standard of the GSTC, and they went through a process of verification, which is impartial, et cetera, et cetera. And then the product with the certify, an hotel, a tour operator, or destinations can use, beside the logo of that specific certification program, the logo of the GSTC. We hope to reach soon a critical mass, big enough, so that the GSTC logo will be recognized worldwide, and therefore the customers will see AirCheck if they know AirCheck better than others, but they also see the GSTC logo close to it, and will probably give a further strength to the value of certification. You know, eco-labeling is on the rise. We have, for example, in FSC, the Forestry Stewardship Council, I think more than 50% of wood products are certified today. If we look, for example, coffee, again, I think it's about the same percentage. Now, of course, travel is more complex than coffee or wood. We're talking about a supply chain, is a chain of services. This is why it's a more complicated and complex process. But I think we are proceeding. I would like to have here a couple of examples TUI, I mentioned one of our members, 77% of the owned hotel by TUI are certified by an accredited GSTC body. Another example, Royal Caribbean, the second largest cruising company today, they committed by 2019 to ensure that all their tour operations, when they reach the destinations, are certified by a program which is accredited by GSTC. So I think we're doing, I believe, a good progress. We'll look forward to expand that, but I think these are two, in my view, two important examples with two big players in the tourist sector. Now, today, I think we cannot talk sustainability without touching over-tourism. And first, some quick conclusions. Over-tourism is not the same. There is not a fixed rule for solving it. It's different in every destination. And most importantly, it's often a matter of sensibility rather than data. There is not a fixed number that says, above this number, I have over-tourism, or below I don't have it. This is not the way it works. And to address it, basically, there is a key message. Strategizing and conduct long-term planning and involve all the stakeholders. This is part of the GSTC criteria, but I think it's good to fix our attention on this specific issue now because, as you know, unfortunately, it has become of actuality. And then, of course, use of new technologies is really important, as we see from a few examples. And some of the practical action, you know, the seasonality, address the seasonality, spread the visits over time, try to do pricing policies, regulate the accommodation offer, the Airbnb, how do you regulate the tourist apartment rental, and sometimes, extreme case, limit access and activities. And I have a few examples of this. I think the Prime Minister yesterday mentioned this one. Thailand, Maya Beach, closed down, too many tourists. The biodiversity of the place was too vulnerable, so it was decided to close it at least for an indeterminate time. Philippines, I mean, the President Duterte called this Boracay Beach a cesspool and decided to close it for a few months. Palma de Mallorca. Palma de Mallorca is the capital of Mallorca, which is the biggest of the Balearic Islands in Spain. About a month ago, the local authorities decided to shut down all the tourist apartments, all of them, with a few exceptions of detached houses outside the city, because one, they could not control the flows of tourists. Two, local residents could not afford to pay rents anymore. The cost of the rent has doubled or tripled in some times, and they were then somehow forced to take that decision. 20 South European cities have formed an alliance, and they've drafted a manifesto against over-tourism. And they've done a number of statements of things they don't want to see in tourist development in their cities. Venice. Venice has got 60,000 residents, 30 million visitors per year. So about 10 days ago, they've decided to install turnstiles to limit massive tourist flow. We'll have to see how this works. I'm not sure this is the right solution, but you see how situations get desperate sometimes because of unmanaged or unplanned tourism. Dubrovnik, as you know, is a small, beautiful city on the Adriatic coast, a walled city. But if you have two big cruising ships, I mean, the city is full of people. You cannot even walk. So the Dubrovnik authorities, they've taken a decision to have some limitations on the size and the numbers, etc., need for some regulations. Now, I'd like to show very briefly, this is a model that was developed by the WTTC, the World Tourism and Travel Council, which I find it very, very useful. It's basically a diagnostic, and they've assessed 60 cities. This is Barcelona. So this is a diagnostic that basically tells you where you have your major vulnerabilities. You know, Barcelona has been on the news as well for a few months now, and indicate where the major problems are. In the case of Barcelona, it's about overloaded infrastructure, it's about attraction concentration, it's about density of tourism. So this model of WTTC basically takes into account a number of elements, which is the alienated local residents, the degraded tourism experience, the overloaded infrastructure, the damage in nature, and the threat to cultural and heritage. And then this was a report done, I think, by McKinsey for WTTC, and then they established 9 metrics in order to be able to measure how these whether there is or not this vulnerability in terms of percentages compared with other destinations. Now, it's very interesting to see that negative TripAdvisor reviews as one of the biggest metrics. So we're talking about digitalizations. Here we have in part of science now is basically the review and the opinions of travelers through an engine like it is TripAdvisor. So the share of poor or terrible reviews, basically, and the percentage of that gives you one of the elements that allows you to assess whether there is an over-tourism stress or an overcrowding stress in a specific destinations. Other elements are the arrival seasonality, the density and intensity of tourism, how many tourists are in the same attraction at the same time. And I found this model pretty useful, has been used for cities so far, but in my view, it's pretty useful for island as well, especially for all destinations who have a certain geographical limitations. Now, you can also have a more positive approach. We're seeing, the case we're seeing is basically shutting down or limit activities. Now, Amsterdam has tried to have a more positive approach, and it's basically using new technologies, digitalizations. So you have a website, first of all, I think most of the cities is easily accessible by Wi-Fi. You can have at any given time know whether the top attraction is crowded or not. You can receive automatically notifications or where you better don't go at that time. There is even one of these applications that based on your social profile, if you agree to it, or Facebook or whatever, tells you what you're likely to like and maybe orient you instead of being on the canals, which is overcrowded, they send you somewhere else because they know that you like, I don't know, food or horse riding or whatever, you know. And another positive example, and I think has to do with digitalization as well. This is very recent, Elba Island. Elba is an island in Tuscany, in Italy, and they've just signed an agreement with Google. So they were able basically to map all islands, all the tracks, all the beaches. I think it's the first island which is totally mapped. So every visitor that goes there through an application is able to see in Google Map where he is or she is, where he can go, etc. So this is again another, I would say, very positive use of digitalizations in order to manage and to improve the quality of visitations. Okay, so then just some final conclusions. I think it's clear from my presentations that we should not really aim at numbers as many plans do. We want to increase from 1 million to 2 million. I don't think this is the way. We should focus more on the quality and on the benefits we expect from a tourist growth. There is an increased demand for authenticity, and I think we should catch our market opportunity. And there is a demand for responsible products. At the panel we had yesterday, it was a presentation, I think, from Sun Hotels, and I've asked them, but why you spend money and time on being certified? They say, well, TUI, which is our tour operators, will basically sell the products that are certified. And TUI sells certified products because the customers demand certified products. So there is a demand there. It's a good investment, not only to improve your management, but also to have a better market access. And brand that you are sustainable. And brand it in a way that does not only say, I'm saving 20% of energy, I'm saving 50% of water, but tell the customer what is in it for him or for her. You know, tell him how an authentic local food is much better than an imported one. Explain the benefits of visiting a sustainable destination or a sustainable hotel. And finally, again, I mentioned before, but involving the community, stakeholders, large chain, sit around the table, define a strategy. I think this is the best solutions to have a more sustainable tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cabrini.